doesn't really matter if you've driven the Supra or not. You already have an opinion. I know you do. If you're a car person and you've looked at the internet once in the past 6 months, you have an opinion of whether the Supra is any good or not.
When Toyota and BMW started the project, their collaboration was focused around two very important cars. The Z4 targeted the Boxster. The Supra was going directly after the Cayman. They had to do a lot to bring this car back because they knew everybody would have an opinion about it. But we've got the two benchmark cars.
You're watching Everyday Driver. We make a TV show, podcast,
and YouTube channels dedicated to great cars, driving adventures, and helping you find a car you'll love.
subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss a thing.
This is the Porsche 718 Cayman S, the third generation of the Cayman in the more powerful form. And it's here because this is the benchmark that Toyota chose for itself.
The 718 nomenclature is historic. With the 550, the 718 from the 50s, this channels all of those cars, stylistically speaking, and also as a way to introduce the flat four engine.
In the 718, Porsche has taken the second generation of the Cayman, which was a beautiful car, and just tightened up a bit.
The surfaces are actually flattened. They're not quite as swollen. What that's done is make the whole car appear flatter and wider and longer. And the interior, you might claim, is boring. But I think Porsche wants to pull their cars back to more classic look that will stay relevant and look fine for longer.
This is a $80,000, $90,000 car with the interior material of a GTI. Everything else is good, and you start driving and you won't notice, but yeah.
This is the BMW M2 competition. The competition is just BMW speak for this is how we should have built the car in the first place.
Even though BMW has the Z4 to match the Supra, this is their better dedicated enthusiast hard driving platform.
I do love the purposeful, aggressive look to this car. The seating position in this is quite a bit higher, and the cabin is very familiar. You're going to see the instrument panel with the same kinds of shapes.
The M2 competition has added this all-digital looking, very cool gauge cluster that feels like the old traditional clocks. It feels really high-end. Everything else here is a revised 2 Series BMW because, of course, this is a BMW 2 Series.
We are here today to compare two BMWs and a Porsche. I'm kidding, it's the Supra, the return of the Supra.
Toyota really wants you to know how much this car is a Toyota. The problem is there are signs and placards and stampings in the metal that show you that it's a BMW.
Back in 2012, Tadasan, the chief engineer for this car, was sent to BMW to work on a sports car project.
The FT1 concept was all see-through vents and crazy arcs, and as they put that styling on this smaller body, you end up with these weird strakes and cuts that aren't actually usable vents. The more you look at it, though, the better it gets, and when you stand next to it, it has an X-Factor presence that really is compelling. The gauge cluster feels like that's just this car, but the infotainment system and this entire center stack is BMW from the prior generation. The seats are excellent, great all-day seats, and you still don't slide around.
I love the flat six, don't get me wrong. But the power coming out of this, you'd think, only 350? When this turbo hits, you're gone.
This Cayman is every bit as quick as both of those other two cars, but it doesn't feel as powerful. Now, it feels lighter on its feet than the other two, but those feel like they've got more of a hammer hiding in them somewhere. This just feels like all the power you ever expected. Traditionally, with a Porsche Flat 6, you have to rev it out. The more power you give it, the higher you get in the rev band, the more you actually find the power that's there. With these turbos, that's all gone. We're in turbo land now. There's no waiting, there's power all the time in the mid-range. Now that means it doesn't have as much character up high. In fact, it's kind of characterless when you get near redline. But there is power in whatever gear you're in whenever you need it.
And if you keep it on boost, which is what Sport Mode and Sport Plus really will do for you, there's always power. The revs increase when you stick it in Sport Mode, and of course you've got the overboost function. I'm one of those people that love the sound. I love it for its history. I love it that it differentiates the Caymans from the 911.
From an objective usability standpoint, this Flat 4 is better than the Flat 6. You've got power more often, it is more reliable in its output, it is more powerful. All of these are good things. You've just lost some of the fun. It's like the life of the party. Grew up, had kids, got a solid job, became reliable and consistent. And you're glad, but you kind of miss the old days.
The engine is unique to the Cayman, but there's brakes from the 911 Carrera. There's a steering rack from the 911 Turbo.
This, like the M2 we have here, is a 6-speed manual, but this is by far the best manual transmission.
It just feels correct. Whenever it slots into gear, it gives you that solid reassurance.
The movements of the shifter are very positive. The heel toe is actually perfect. This is one of those 6-speed gearboxes that just makes you go, yeah, I should have got the manual.
All three of these cars, interestingly, have pulled parts from other cars to build them. BMW has mastered the art of throwing all their parts onto a car and making something that is astounding.
Traditional M2, as it came out, had what was called the N55 engine, which was an older motor for BMW. This now has the S55, a different engine than the original BMW M2. It has a different engine than the BMW M240. It has a different engine than the BMW Z4 and the Supra we have with us. Somebody at BMW is just taking engine darts and just chucking them at the product board.
It's gone up to 405 horsepower, twin turbos on this engine. I'm delighted by the power, honestly. And I think BMW's sandbagging us. I think they're still underreporting the engine power because it feels like far more power than you'd ever believe.
It does have a great personality that actually grows in power toward the top of the rev band, which is something typically a naturally aspirated engine does. This M2 maintains that. But I'll also tell you this, it doesn't feel faster than the Supra. It's kind of crazy. It should feel faster than the Supra. It doesn't.
The M2 competition has a manual transmission. There's a bit of a rubbery disconnect in the shift linkage, but I think the spirit of the car is best suited with manual. Interestingly, I don't feel the same way about the Supra.
Now, I'm not slighting Toyota for this. I mean, they are one of the biggest car makers in the world. They probably could have done a Supra by themselves. But they wanted somebody who already had a good, straight inline 6 engine.
It's the B58 engine, which is found in other cars, and I think Toyota's sandbagging us on this car too.
This is an engine that is rated, depending upon whether you believe BMW with the Z4 or Toyota with the Supra, it's either 335 horsepower or 385 horsepower. And they're both wrong. This specific Supra is owned by a guy who has a race performance shop. They happen to be doing some dyno runs of one of their cars. And for a joke, with less than 100 miles on it, they just thought, let's put the Supra on and see what it does. 400.
I know everybody's going to tune the daylights out of it, and they're lamenting the loss of the 2JZ engine, but here we are with this engine from BMW. Every time I drive the Supra, I'm continually glad that BMW and Toyota got together to make this thing.
This has a single turbo straight 6, 3-liter from BMW. The M2 has a dual turbo, and yet this feels more ready to rocket you down the road at all times than the engine in the M2.
When I first read that Toyota had chosen an automatic transmission for their car, I had to bite my tongue. Surely they know what they're doing, right? Indeed, they do.
We've got this ZF 8-speed automatic, which is in almost any car you can buy now. However, this remains the best tuning of this ZF transmission I've ever used.
It's almost as if Toyota's transmission has been tuned like a PDK can think. I'm astounded how well it shifts.
Everyday Driver is brought to you by Covercraft. Use the code EVERYDAY for 10% off your order.
In spite of the Z4 sharing a chassis with that Supra, this M2 competition, I think, is the best focused sports car BMW makes right now. The problem is, BMW is traditionally a sedan maker. In spite of the fact they've made plenty of two-doors over the years, this is kind of sedan-shaped, isn't it? They could slap two more doors on it and call it a Grand Coupe.
BMW's engineers have taken the regular old M2, and the rear axle subframe is no longer attached to the car with rubber bushings. It's bolted directly to the chassis. They've also stiffened up everything about the front end on this car, and they have enhanced the steering rack. It feels like the luxury car done for handling, even though this is a hot sports car. This is a hardcore car. But the problem is an initial, immediate direction change. There is a beat, a tiny beat, and then the car rotates.
It is bigger and heavier than these other two cars, and you can feel it. You actually sit up significantly higher, even with the seat as low as it will go. I'm sitting pretty high in this car. Now that makes my visibility, frankly, great. So a bigger car with a higher seating position, it just doesn't feel as engaged or precise or sports car dedicated as the other two. But of course, this is the only one that isn't a dedicated sports car chassis.
You gotta throw it in and hold your line, and it sticks. But the wheels aren't telling me what the road surface is doing. I'm not feeling as much. Those minute mid-corner adjustments are here.
It's a problem that BMW struggled with ever since they left their great hydraulic steering racks. This M2, for all of its excellent dynamics and how well it hangs on in a corner, really tells you nothing here. There's just no information. You can make the effort harder, but you didn't get more info for your trouble. As a result, it has this fake steering heavy weight that doesn't tell me any of the information about what the tires are doing.
Porsche has pulled the steering rack out of the 911 Turbo, the Big Daddy, and stuffed it into this car. It's still electromechanical, but interestingly, I no longer have any problems with electric power steering. I'm feeling the undulations of the road. I'm feeling the flex of the suspension.
After the completely numb steering feel of the BMW M2, this Cayman is overwhelming you with great information and granular details about the rotation of the car. This car is delicate. Oh, it's precise. Throwing this into a corner, you can actually find the mid-engine working for you.
That initial turn-in is excellent. But what I love most about the Cayman is how you can use the steering with the weight transfer of the car.
This has all of the best qualities of a mid-engine car, where you can put your foot in it pretty early and you can get the back to settle for you and help you with rotation in a way that a front-engine car just wants to send the back around. It's really difficult to get this car fully out of shape. Now, of course, you could. Look at the corner. Come on. That's perfect.
Just under 3,000 pounds with a manual transmission. It's such the right recipe. And it's the ringer because it's where the weight's located. The mid-engine configuration has lightened up the front of this car so much that it is the car with everything.
Now, wheelbase alone is not what makes a car handle well. Here you have something that is roughly the size of the Cayman, but you're sitting back over the back axle. That completely changes not only the way you view the world, but also the way the car rotates.
The wheelbase is the same as the Cayman, but the weight's in a different place here. I feel more of the weight transfer, but There's very little understeer. They wanted this thing to rotate, and it does.
It's near impossible to get mid-engine rotation out of a non-mid-engine car, and Toyota's got really close. Somehow, BMW has built for Toyota a car with better steering feel than they make for themselves.
The turn-in is quite a bit better than the M2, but it doesn't have nearly the feedback of the Cayman. It tracks precisely, and what's great is it does have a lot of that mid-corner precise adjustment that the Cayman has. Because BMW has started with this coupe, it's the most usable car of all the three. You can do the track thing, you can do the commute thing with this car. And for that reason, I love the M2 competition.
This is a fantastic do-it-all, and I think maybe the best car of this type being sold right now. This 2+2 almost sedan. Dad has a hidden hot car shape.
The Cayman has gotten even better. It's the slowest of all three of them, but it's the most fun.
It's hard to find light, chuckable cars in the modern time. We've got so many safety things happening now that they've just gotten heavier and less informative. The Cayman remains talkative. It remains a car that feels light on its feet and willing to do fun.
Toyota knew what they were doing. They knew they had a legacy and a history to reflect upon, and they would get vilified if they didn't do something right. At no point should you ever think, it's an automatic and I don't want it because it won't drive so well. It's not true. If anybody tries to convince you of that, they are not your friend.
I love that this Supra is more than you expect. The gearbox is better. The engine is more powerful than it claims. The steering actually has information that the BMWs lack. At every turn, this car surprises me. I'm not really sure what would offend more people if I say that the best BMW made is a Toyota or the best Toyota made right now is a BMW. You're equally offended. I know what you're thinking. Wait a minute, jackets and hats, wasn't that a gorgeous sunny day? It is a gorgeous sunny day, but it's also fall in Utah, so it's a bit cold today, and I don't care. We've got three amazing cars, 4-star cars, all three of them. I would buy any of these cars. If you bought it, I'd say congratulations.
Oh, absolutely.
But we have to decide.
Okay, so we have to decide, but first of all, I want you to think about where these cars came from. They've cribbed parts from all their siblings,
That's a good point.
to make these cars. You've got to decide which is best for your driving style and what suits you best.
Yeah.
But otherwise, pick one, and you're doing great.
The big thing I want to say here is Supra versus Cayman. It is so close to being equivalent. The only place that I debate whether or not the Supra should win this is because I don't think the Cayman is a $15,000, $20,000 more expensive car. I don't think it is.
Okay.
And I can't believe I'm going to say this because the M2 competition is fantastic.
It is.
And it's somehow third because somebody's got to be third.
I was fastest in that car on every drive-by we had.
Yep.
I could feel it.
Yep.
But then there's these other two that are just pulling me away. I'm amazed that I love the Supra this much. I've never felt the Cayman dynamics in this because it's the same wheelbase.
Close. They got close.
They really did. But then again, there's this M2 right here that I would happily take. It is so finely sliced, but the M2 was brilliant.
Can you sense that driving these back-to-back makes the conclusion only get harder? Can you sense this?
This is one of the harder days, by the way.
No, it's not. We did
this
today. Come on, this isn't a hard day.
Well,
it's a hard decision-making, but this is not a hard day.
The M2 competition now does heroic things only sports cars should be able to do. But the thing that holds them back is the lack of a genuine sports car chassis.
I like the usability. It's fast. I wish the gearbox felt like the Porsches. I'm being really picky to come up with those cons for the car because the truth is the M2 is a fantastic car that is ready for your track day and the carpool lane.
Even though the Supra targeted the Cayman, this is still the benchmark.
It's still better, but it's not much better. And if you're talking about new prices, oh, that Supra's compelling.
I'm choosing this as my second car, my second place car, because of the wheelbase, and it does similar things to what the Cayman can do.
This is an amazing car. They've done a really good job. Okay, two companies work together. All right, it's got Toyota badging and it's mostly a BMW, but Toyota got the better car out of the deal.